Judge ruling this morning against the city of Green Bay on its audio recording policy.
Those devices will now be disabled as part of a temporary restraining order, which was granted, and all data collected so far will be stored but not distributed. In a First Alert update, Jason Zimmerman was at today's hearing and breaks down what we know.
By granting a temporary restraining order, 3 audio recording devices on the first and second floor of Green Bay City Hall will now be disabled, even though the city maintains the equipment is meant for public safety and there's no expectation of privacy in a public building. The judge didn't necessarily agree.
Do you think that the city can take away someone's expectation of privacy by saying, hey, by the way, you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy? You think the city can do that?
It no longer becomes reasonable when you are told what's occurring. That's the point.
Well, I don't know that I can agree that you lose your right to speak privately if someone says to you, you can't speak privately. I'm not so sure I agree with that.
Just weeks ago, the city posted signs warning people about the audio recording devices, but only after the filing of a civil lawsuit by the Wisconsin State Senate, with State Senator Andre Jacques being among the plaintiffs. After the ruling, they had this to say.
It's great news that this practice is going to end, that people will have freedom to speak freely in City Hall, and that recordings won't be used against them by the government.
However, the judge also questioned the timing of the lawsuit, since city employees were notified by email about the surveillance, but the issue is just now coming to light as Mayor Eric Genrich campaigns for re-election.
I'm concerned that there was some type of underhandedness or strategy in waiting until after the city primary and before the city election to dirty up the mayor, and that's unfortunate. This is an important and fundamental right. I think people knew about this, and it should have been brought in earlier.
An attorney for the city declined to speak afterwards, but revealed in court that the ruling will be appealed. The city council is also expected to take up the issue next Tuesday. Reporting in Green Bay, Jason Zimmerman, Action 2 News.